So, this is Councillor Graham Campbell. I'm the co-convener of SNP Socialist. And again, I'm joined by my co-convener friend, Janis Wilson. Say hi.
Hi.
And
Good
this is
morning.
another week where I'm afraid it's not true that nothing's happening. This week something really is happening. You know, week is a long time in politics, but it's an incredible day that we just had. It's an incredible week. But I'll start with what happened just a few minutes ago. I was at the launch of the SNP Glasgow campaign for the MPs there. And John Swinney came and met the 6 candidates and in a hall in Barrowfield in the East End to Glasgow. And it was a nice little launch, really, because John's speech was spot on in terms of tackling Keir Starmer on austerity. He said he would work with him, but he wants an emergency budget to be done by Labour if they get into office that committed against austerity. He made the point about them sharing the Tory plans in terms of the spending limits and the precautionary debt rules that the Tories have been following. He wants to follow the same pattern. And he said we have to break with austerity. Otherwise, the Institute of Fiscal Studies has said £18 billion worth of cuts across the UK's health and education services would be required to follow those fiscal rules. So he's saying we must reject that. And so his demand for Keir Starmer was very clear, anti-austerity platform. He also said that the work the SNP MPs have done in Westminster, which has been amazing, about Alison Thewlis on the side on the two-child benefit cap, and on the question of energy companies and all that stuff, and other colleagues like Chris Stevens on trade union rights. So he was bigging them up, and it was basically saying that SNP MPs was in there to hold Westminster to account. But every time Westminster offers cuts to the Scottish Government budget, and then their same parties are in the Holyrood government Parliament saying, oh, well, we have to spend more money, but they won't say how they pay for it. And he's ruled out tax rises, whereas in Scotland we raise taxes for the rich to pay for it. He made the point that we would have £1.5 billion less to spend if we hadn't taken that tough decision to tax the wealthy more. So that was the gist of John's speech, and I thought he went down really well in the room. We got stupid questions from the Daily Record and from Clyde One about Michael Matheson. You'd expect them, but actually most of the others actually asked sensible questions about the campaign, about what they thought he would ask for Keir Starmer, what relationship that the Scottish government would have with a Labour government down south. So that was basically the gist of it.
Did he mention the fact that he's been barred from participating in the ITV debate?
Actually, no, nobody asked him about that, which he should have been. But then, of course, that's the British media for you, isn't it? That, of course, they only want the candidates for Prime Minister. And probably both of them said they didn't want the other leaders. I guarantee you that's what they said. Because obviously, if John had been there, John would have been making the anti-austerity point. And they don't want somebody to say that because that's what they agree about. Not that. So, what else has happened?
So I would like to talk a bit about Rafa and the appalling images that were circulating on social media after that incredibly horrific bombing campaign, which resulted in scenes that would have been more suited to some kind of dystopian horror movie. That the child that didn't have a head, and someone spoke about Napalm Girl during the Vietnam War, that very iconic image. And how it was held up to say, to talk about the horrors of war. Who's speaking about the child that was held up in Rafa? Who's talking about that child? The only reason I saw it is because it was shared on Instagram. None of the, correct me if I'm wrong, none of the news channels have reported it. It's just...
No, I'm afraid that Donald Trump's...
absolutely...
Donald Trump's guilty verdict has kind of overshadowed that on international news. I didn't even know. If I'd spoken to you, I wouldn't have known about it.
It was last week that I first saw it. And it was the father held this child up and the child no longer had a head.
Yeah.
And when it was reported that Hamas had beheaded babies, which of course isn't true, everyone was apoplectic with rage, and rightly so. Why is no one raging about this child, this family? I don't, the apathy is just inhumane.
I wouldn't say that.
So I would just like to get it out there that I have never experienced horrors like this. I mean, I was young when I was a kind of young, much younger when the Rwandan genocide took place and the Bosnian War, and those were reported on widely. But this has had very little coverage. This horrific scene that is haunting.
So you think it's the My Lai moment of this war? Then that's the one in Vietnam.
The father held up his child that no longer had a head.
Yeah.
Where's the outrage? Palestinian lives don't matter to the Western media.
And they ought to be featuring in the election campaign. I suppose that's one thing I think we need to sort of try in our campaigning to make sure that it is an election issue.
The SNP is the only party nationally that is, I don't know about the Lib Dems actually, of course the Greens, but the SNP is the only one talking about permanent ceasefires, the inhumanity. How is this being ignored? I don't understand how this can be ignored on such a massive scale. I don't get it.
Because of course, supporting the Palestinians, which the majority of the public does, and I don't. Obviously, we have to remember, of course, people protested about this constantly. To protest in Glasgow, which would be great against the arms industry. Protesters in England got found not guilty for attacking oil companies for their role in this. Barclays and Bank, and I think other banks have also been targeted successfully at their AGMs, and their shareholders have their stuff put to them. So, people across the UK are showing their opposition in spades to what the British government's doing in supporting Israel's genocide. And people are naming it. The South Africans are taking the court, but also other countries are joining it. Ireland, Norway, and Spain recognize Palestine. So that momentum is swinging very firmly against Israel. They won't be allowed to get away with it, I hope, but clearly the more pressure needs to be put on the current government, but also, of course, the incoming UK Labour.
Which brings us nicely to the next topic, which is Starmer's purge of anyone who shows any signs of humanity at all.
Well,
what the hell?
I have to say, I know Diane Abbott, right? I don't know her very well, but I do know her former assistant, who is now an MP, a candidate. She was the MP for Streatham, Bell Ribera Addo, and she worked for Diane for many years. I know her very well. And I have to say, from a sort of black left, black sections perspective from within the Labour movement, that movement was really core in building the coalition around candidates like Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott, and that was a key ingredient of the London Labour movement. And the fact that we've got a Labour leader that's so nakedly institutionally racist towards Diane personally, that you saw the humiliation Diane Abbott faced in the Commons when they were actually debating this Tory racist attack on her, and she wasn't allowed to speak. And Keir Starmer goes, "Oh, how can I help you, Diane?" And Diane says, "Give me back the whip." And he still didn't do it until he was embarrassed into it. And then poor Faiza Shaheen, if you saw her on Newsnight the other night, I mean, that's astonishing that they would undermine one of the few Corbynite candidates who actually increased their vote massively in Chingford, nearly got Ian Duncan Smith's scalp. That's why he's standing down, because next time he would have been got. She done such a fantastic job for that party. They've absolutely betrayed her and every, Black Labour activist and Muslim Labour activist and voter in London that ever did any work for that party. I don't see how any black or Muslim person could vote for that party anywhere and feel that they can. It's an institutionally racist party which hierarchizes, puts anti-Semitism at the top of a false hierarchy of racism. But also, it's not just that they use anti-Semitism as a weapon, but actually they're ignoring the Jewish voices who have spoken out against Palestinian genocide.
Jackie Walker being a classic example. I saw her when she came to Edinburgh. 2017, I think it was, 16, 17. She's an amazing, amazing woman.
She is indeed, yeah. And she would not have been expelled from our party. She'd have said exactly the same things from our platform that she said from the Labour platform. Our view is her view on these on the matter of Palestine, and that tells you what kind of party the Labour Party is now. It's uninhabitable for anybody progressive.
I mean, I hope. Is it Luke? Is it Luke Akehurst? Is that the
Yes.
gentleman's name? Who is
He is
awful.
Well, he actually came up in Brett John's press conference today.
Right.
John was asked a question about him. He said, well, if that's the kind of guy who says he thinks that prison hulks should be had in the for asylum seekers and refugees in the north of Scotland, that's the kind of person Labour wants to put forward. It shows you their moral compass is very, very
incredible. It's
so
almost
yes,
like
he got mentioned, but that's the kind of people they want to be Labour MPs and keep people like, you know, Natalie Elphicke, but get rid of Diane and Jeremy. You know, well, Diane's very clear; she will stand as an independent, and they know she'll win. She will win.
She's got one of the biggest majorities in the country, hasn't she?
Yeah,
and so's Jeremy Corbyn.
She will win, but Labour have clearly are in danger of losing a number of seats because if they lose the Black and Asian and Muslim votes, that's a lot of seats they won't get or face significant challenge from independents. And I think they need that scare up their backside.
It's almost as if they're sabotaging the election.
I don't think they're sabotaging it. They think that they can get right-wing and centrist Tory votes.
Of course,
in greater number than they will lose left-wing voters. They think that they can't lose these seats. I think the Galloway thing shows that they can actually lose these.
Yeah.
If that voice is galvanized behind a better candidate than Galloway. But you know what I mean? Somebody with decent politics, with a track record of stand up for the working class, as Diane and Jeremy have, they have a very good chance of winning.
Yeah.
Let's hope they do. And I hope Faiza Shaheen does the same.
I hope, there was another gentleman with a double-barreled surname, I can't remember his name.
Oh, Lloyd Russell Moyle,
He's been sacked as well, hasn't he? Because he tweeted something vaguely pro-Palestinian or something. I can't remember, but it's incredible. I'm kind of watching it thinking, I remember the Labour Party in the 70s, only just. And this is just a really bad imitation of a Labour Party that's just lurching and going after votes that would have seemed insane for them to do 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
But they're going to govern from the centre-right. And, you know, if you're a centre-left voter, you have to think, well, is that party that chimes with my moral values? And particularly if you're a Scottish centre-left voter, is that the party I want to represent and will defend my interests in Scotland? And I think the answer to that is big fat no.
For SNP.
That's it.